Ain't none of this shit promise, ain't none of this promise.
Ain't none of this promise, ain't none of it's promise.
Ain't none of this shit certain, ain't none of it certain.
Ain't none of it's perfect. I hope it was worth it.
If nothing is promised, if nothing is certain, then what does that mean? If nothing is promised, if nothing is certain, that means nothing is guaranteed, nothing is deterministic, nothing is predetermined. This notion gets at the heart of the theological debate of predestination versus free will. This idea also is what led Albert Einstein to make the famous quote, "God does not play dice with the universe." Greetings, family. It's none other than your brother, Professor Ace, AfricanCreationEnergy.com. Today, I want to talk to you about the topic of chaos, which is a topic that I discuss in the book Supreme Mathematic, African Math Magic, and also in the book The Science of Sciences and the Science in Sciences. I want to talk about chaos as it relates to STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And I also want to talk about chaos as it relates to theology, philosophy, cosmology, metaphysics, religion, and spirituality. So oftentimes we discuss and focus on the importance of order and the role that order plays in our lives, that we neglect a proper comprehension of order's counterpart, the concept of chaos, and what role or practical application, if any, that chaos plays in our lives in the universe, right? So first off, what is chaos? The dictionary definition of the word chaos is confusion, lawlessness, disorder, unpredictability, indeterminism, and randomness. In different fields, in different contexts, the term chaos takes on different meanings with a variety of different implications. But before I talk about chaos as it relates to the different fields and contexts, I want to start the conversation by discussing the African chaos gods of Kemet, because it was reflecting on the meaning of the different chaos gods and differentiating their purposes, which inspired me to do this video in the first place. So when we study Kemet, the word chaos comes up in a few instances when we learn about the different deities or Netiru, right? We see the word chaos associated with the Neter Set or Satuk, the brother of Asar, the uncle of Heru. We also find the word chaos associated with the Neter Nun or Nu, the primordial abyss or chaotic waters. In Medu Neter, the word for chaos is Isfet, which is the opposite of Ma'at, which means order and balance. And the embodiment of Isfet or chaos in Kemetic mythology was an entity called Apep or Apophis. So we have Nun, Set, Isfet, and Apep, and disambiguating the different types of chaos as it relates to these different principles in Kemetic mythology will help us understand and disambiguate the different types of chaos in the various fields and contexts as we proceed in our discussion. So first, let's talk about the African chaos god Nun, right? Nun, also pronounced Nu, was the first of the 8 members of the Ogdog. Nun's name means primordial waters, and he represented the chaotic waters of pre-creation out of which Atum-Re, the sun, was born. In the Kemetic mythology of Nun, before creation, the primordial waters of Nun were everywhere, stretching endlessly in all directions. In ancient Egyptian mythology, Nun was considered an undifferentiated, dark, chaotic, limitless expanse, and the present cosmos is likened to an island of order amid the chaotic waters of Nun. In the Memphite theology, Ptah rose from the primordial chaotic waters of Nun, and he was represented in Heliopolis as an obelisk or Benben stone, who would then generate Nefertum or Atum-Re, representing the sun and all the elements that proceeded forth from the sun. In this regard, Nun can be likened to the subatomic quantum realm that had to exist prior to the atomic elements of the periodic table. In the cosmology of ancient Kemet, the idea of the Big Bang, where primordial chaos transforms into the order of matter in the cosmos, is called Zep Tepi, meaning the first time. In the United States of America, the symbolism of the Benben obelisk rising from the primordial chaotic waters of Nun was copied in the design of the Washington Monument obelisk, appearing like it's coming out of water, representing Ordo ab Chaos, or order out of chaos, and the duality of the double-headed eagle of the Scottish Rite 33rd degree Freemasonry. So from Nun, at the beginning of the universe, or cosmogony in ancient Kemet, to the end of the universe, or eschatology in ancient Kemet, now let's talk about the being called Apep. As mentioned earlier, the word for chaos in the Medu Neter language of ancient Kemet is Isfet, and this word is also translated as meaning injustice, violence, and evil. Isfet was the opposite of Ma'at, meaning order, balance, and truth. According to the ancient Egyptian beliefs, Isfet and Ma'at were part of a complementary and paradoxical duality where one could not exist without its counterpart. That is to say, Isfet and Ma'at balanced each other. While the sun god Re was the embodiment of Ma'at or order, the embodiment of Isfet or chaos was a being called Apep, also called Apophis by the Greeks. Apep was depicted as a giant serpent, often coiled in figure-8 patterns, who attempted nightly to destroy the sun god Re, and hence destroy the order of the universe. Apep was called the Lord of Chaos in the mythology of ancient Kemet, and Apep is absent from the creation myths. Thus, Apep was not a primordial force, but rather Apep shows up as part of the eschatological myths about the end of the universe, implying that Apep or chaos was a consequence of the birth of Re or order. Scientists have even named the asteroid that may collide with the Earth in the year 2029 with the name Apophis 99942. So in the mythology of ancient Kemet, the universe originated out of the chaotic waters of Noon and one day will be destroyed by the chaos of Apep. From chaos we all come, and to chaos we must return. The last chaos deity that we want to discuss is that of Set, or Satuk, or Sutek, as some say, or as the Greeks called him, Typhoon. Set was the ancient Egyptian god of the desert, storms, fire, chaos, violence, and foreigners. While Heru or Horus ruled Kemet, the black land, the fertile land, Set ruled the red land, the vast desert of the Sahara. The animal that is used to represent Set is unknown. It is referred to as the Shah or Set animal, and it looks like a canine or maybe a donkey or giraffe. But I think it's brilliant that for a deity that is supposed to represent chaos or uncertainty, the ancient Egyptians symbolized it by an animal that you can't really be certain what it is. Many modern depictions of Set show his face colored as black. However, when we look at ancient Egyptian depictions of Set and the Set animal that were in color, Set was depicted as white. And this makes sense symbolically in that if Set was supposed to be the opponent of Heru or Asar, Lord of the Perfect Black, both who represented Kemet, the black land, then it would make sense that Set, who is their opponent, would be depicted as white. Many people are familiar with the mythology of Asar or Osiris and Set and how Set murdered his brother Asar by cutting up his body into pieces. But when most people tell the story, they tell it as if Set was simply jealous of Asar. But there was another part of the story which serves as Set's motive for his actions. So the other part of the story is that since Aset or Isis and Nebhet were sisters, they look very similar. And Aset was supposed to be Asar's wife and Nebhet was supposed to be Set's wife. So one day Asar got drunk and mistakenly thought that Nebhet was his wife Aset and had sex with Nebhet. After that incident, Nebhet found out she was pregnant with Anubis by Asar, and this is what enraged Set to want to kill his brother Asar. As the cult of Asar grew into prominence in ancient Kemet, Set became vilified. Oftentimes when people discuss the history and origin of the devil concept in religion, Set's name is part of that conversation. There are elements of Set's story that mirror the story of Satan from the Judeo-Christian religion, being the eighth fallen angel of the seven archangels, and Set was the fallen or outcast member of the 8 descendants of Atum Re, who were Shu, Tefnut, Geb, Nut, Asar, Set, and Nebhet. Set, as the 8th outcast member, also reflects the story of the pale fox Urugu, who was the outcast member of the 8 Nomo in Dogon culture. But Set was not the devil or Satan in the way that religious people think of that concept today. It is clear that the ancient Egyptians did not view Set as purely negative. There were several pharaohs who were named after Set, who were Seti I and Seti II. Also, Heru and Set are depicted performing the Simatawe unification ritual of the two lands, and the Wa scepter, the symbol of power, was shaped in the image of the Set animal. One interpretation of the fact that the symbol for power, the Wa scepter, was shaped after the Set animal is that power is obtained by control over the forces of chaos. Another interesting philosophical interpretation of the symbols of the staff of Ptah, which contain the Jed, the Ankh, and the Was, symbolizing stability, life, and power, could be taken as the Jed representing order, the Was representing chaos, and life as a balancing act between the duality of order and chaos. In ancient Egyptian mythology, Set also had a positive role where he accompanied Ra on his solar boat to defeat Apep, the serpent of chaos. This image of Set defeating Apep, or chaos fighting against chaos, has interesting interpretive implications that will be explored in our scientific discussion on chaos. So for the chaos gods that we discuss, Noon represents cosmological primordial subatomic chaos, Apep represents eschatological chaos, and Set represents the practical application and control over chaos. Even the letters of Set's name corresponds to the initials of science, engineering, and technology. So now that we've discussed the chaos gods, let's talk about the different fields or different contexts that chaos can be defined and comprehended. Right, so first, In philosophy, chaos is the opposite of truth. In philosophy, chaos is the state where nothing is true, all is permitted, anything goes. Chaos is subjective truth, synonymous with uncertainty. When people make statements like live in your truth or live your truth or speak my truth, as if there are different versions of truth, then these are all ideas that stem from the doctrine of chaos, because truth is not supposed to be subjective but rather objective. In the field of psychology, in the state of the mind, chaos is confusion. That is something that we don't completely understand or comprehend. In psychology, chaos is something we can't make sense of. And since we can't make sense of it, this means that that something is bad or evil or the devil. It is important to note that psychological chaos in the form of confusion may not be true chaos, because the evaluation of what is or is not chaotic is based on the mind's ability to reason and make sense of that thing. For example, one person may have a room that another person says is messy or chaotic, but the owner of that room may know exactly where everything is in the room. So the messy room is chaos in the mind of one person, but not in the mind of another. The concepts of apophenia and pareidolia are also related to the concepts of chaos as it relates to psychology. Apophenia is the mind's attempt to think it has found order within chaos, to make sense out of nonsense, or to try to make sense out of nonsense. For example, if you think you hear a voice in random static noise, that's an example of apophenia. Or the specialized case of apophenia called pareidolia, where you think you see images created in randomly created stimuli like clouds or stars. It's important to note that in order to properly qualify and interpret something as apophenia or pareidolia, the source stimuli has to be created from a random process. That is, a process where there is no meaning and no intent to the creation. Oftentimes online on the internet, people incorrectly use the terms pareidolia and apophenia to qualify interpretations of stimuli that were created by non-random, orderly, and intentional processes. If the source stimuli was created by a non-random, orderly, and intentional process, and a person's interpretation of that stimuli is inaccurate and incorrect, it is not apophenia or pareidolia, it's just a misidentification or misinterpretation. So let's move on into the discussion of chaos as it relates to law and politics. So in law and politics, chaos refers to a society with no rules, lawlessness, and complete anarchy. In law and politics, the concepts of freedom and liberation are actually concepts that stem from the doctrine of chaos. For example, if people were truly free, completely liberated, not bound by any rules or laws, then this would lead to total discord, total anarchy, and total chaos. This is why, as we'll see later in this discussion, New Age esoteric philosophical systems which stem from the doctrine of chaos, such as Aleister Crowley's Thelema, use the model do as thou wilt, because it's equivalent to complete freedom, complete liberation, doing whatever you want to do, i.e. total chaos and total anarchy. And this also gets into the religious and theological debate of predestination versus free will. As we discuss, free will, or do as thou wilt, reflects the concept of chaos, and predestination, God as the grand architect of the universe, the great clockmaker, where everything is predetermined, reflects the concept of order. So in the Judeo-Christian religions, when Adam and Eve acted on their own free will and ate from the tree of knowledge, this was considered an act of sin. When Satan acted on his own free will and rebelled against God, he became evil. In Gnosticism, the free will of Yadabao, the son of chaos, is the source of evil. In the doggone cosmology, when the pale fox Urugu or Ogo acted on his own free will, he became looked at as evil. And as we previously mentioned, the pale fox Urugu, Ogo, or Ogun, the dog of the white cloth, Ajala, in Nigeria, both have associations with the chaos deity from Kemet named Seth or Satuk. But when we really examine the dichotomy of predestination versus free will, you have to ask yourself, do you really have free will? Do you really have free choice? You are free to make a multitude of decisions and choices about actions in your life. You are free to pick which route you want to take, but you are not free to do something that is completely out of the realm of possibility. You may have a million different options that you are free to choose from, and for some of those options, it may be more likely that you will choose that option over another, but they're still options. They're finite, which means that they were predetermined. Imagine a multiple choice test with a billion options per question. Yes, you are free to choose any option, but someone still had to make a determination and provide you with the options on the test to choose from. So that is your life. You are never totally free. And when we study science, when we study nature, we see that to be totally free, to be totally liberated, to have chaos without order is not natural, because we are all bound by the laws of nature, the laws of physics, which are unbreakable. In the book Herucopters, I have a brief discussion about freedom, liberation, and slavery, and make a point that we are all natural slaves to the laws of nature, the laws of physics. We cannot ever be totally free from those laws, even if we try. True laws are unbreakable and binding. Everything else is just merely a suggestion. So now that understanding that freedom and liberation are concepts that stem from the chaos doctrine, I had to ask myself the question, is the United States of America an agent of order or an agent of chaos? When freedom and liberation go too far, and people start saying anything they want to do, doing anything they want to do, acting any way they want to act, being anything they want to be, is that order or is that chaos? Does that lead to order or does that lead to chaos? Right? In the U.S., we have a criminal justice system that is not just, right? It seems as if the rules apply to some, but the rules do not apply to others. Some people are free to do whatever they want with impunity, whereas others are penalized for the smallest infractions. So when we have that dichotomy within the criminal justice system, it makes those bound by the rules desire freedom, desire chaos even more. But that's law and politics. Science and math provide us with the most objective definition of chaos, and it means to measure and determine what is or is not chaos. In mathematics, chaos refers to randomness, the lack of pattern, order, sequence, or predictability. Chaos or randomness is measured and determined mathematically using statistics. Chaos theory is a field of study in mathematics with applications in several disciplines, including meteorology, sociology, physics, engineering, economics, biology, and philosophy. Chaos theory studies the behavior of dynamic systems that are highly sensitive to initial conditions, a response properly referred to as the butterfly effect, which means that small differences in initial conditions yield widely diverging outcomes for dynamic systems, rendering long-term prediction impossible. This happens even though these systems are deterministic, meaning that the future behavior is fully determined by the initial conditions with no random elements involved. In other words, the deterministic nature of these systems does not make them predictable. This behavior is known as deterministic chaos, or simply just chaos. The idea of the butterfly effect, that small changes in initial conditions can lead to vastly different outcomes, is also part of the hypothesis around parallel universe, each universe being the result of just one small difference in a particular event. At the subatomic quantum level, chaos in terms of randomness, uncertainty, and probability dominates. In quantum mechanics, microscopic phenomena are viewed as objectively random. The ability to define characteristics of subatomic quantum particles is given by the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. It was the random nature of quantum subatomic particles which led Albert Einstein to make his famous quote, "God does not play dice with the universe," because he thought the universe was deterministic, but quantum physics turned that idea on its head, being primarily probabilistic or random, ruled by chaos. This form of quantum chaos can be likened to the principles that the African chaos god Noon represents, as previously mentioned. In physics, chaos is discussed in terms of entropy. Entropy is the degree of randomness in a system, or a measure of molecular chaos. The state at which entropy or chaos is at its minimal level is called absolute zero, where the fundamental particles of nature have minimal vibrational motion, retaining only what's called zero-point energy. The state of maximum entropy or maximum chaos is given by the second law of thermodynamics. The second law of thermodynamics states that the total entropy or chaos of a system can never decrease over time, and the universe is slowly evolving toward a state of maximum entropy or maximum chaos. This idea that chaos will one day take over the universe is expressed in the symbolism of Apep from Kemetic Eschatology. As my mom used to say when I was a child, it's easier to mess up than it is to clean up. That is to say, it takes more energy to create and build and create order than it does to destroy and cause chaos. And since destruction or chaos is the path of least resistance, the second law of thermodynamics makes sense. The word eschatology is part of the theology, philosophy, cosmology, and futurology concerned with the ultimate fate of the universe. In modern scientific cosmology, several possible scenarios for the ultimate fate of the universe are proposed, and I discuss some of these scenarios in the book The Science of Sciences and the Science in Sciences. So as we know, the prevailing thought about the origin of the universe is the Big Bang, which is derived from observations that found that galaxies appeared to be moving away from each other, and thus by reverse engineering this motion, the idea suggested that the universe began as a very small, very dense collection of all the fundamental particles and has expanded and become less dense ever since. Continuing to extrapolate about the fact that the galaxies appear to be moving away from each other led to the eschatological theories about the ultimate fate of the universe being that eventually all material objects, all matter in the universe, starting with the galaxies and eventually all forms of matter, will be ripped apart into unbound fundamental particles and energy. It is believed that once all the matter in the universe disintegrates into fundamental particles, this will eventually in time lead to another Big Bang and the formation of another universe in a cyclic cycle. The names given to these various eschatological theories about the universe cycling between chaos and order and back to chaos are called the Big Rip, the Big Bounce, and the Big Crunch. These modern scientific theories of how the universe grew out of chaos into order and will one day return to chaos echo the principles found in the Cosmology and Eschatology of Kemet of how the universe originated out of the chaos of noon and one day will be destroyed by the chaos of Apep. From chaos we all come, and to chaos we must return. In the book Introduction to the Nature of Nature by Afro Unu, he discusses in diagrams in his SMAT circle of order and SMAT circle of chaos how the universe originated out of chaos into order and eventually will one day return to chaos in a perpetual cycle. The fact that order can be destroyed by chaos is a rather intuitive idea that we generally and readily comprehend. However, the idea that chaos can give rise to order is more counterintuitive, but it is described scientifically and mathematically in several ways. Spontaneous order, self-organization, or self-assembly is the scientific concept of the spontaneous emergence of order out of seemingly chaos. It is a process where order naturally arises from local interactions between the parts of an initially disordered chaotic system. The order that arises out of chaos through spontaneous order, self-organization, or self-assembly is not directed or designed by any external agent, but rather results as a natural consequence of the constituent parts and the environment. Entropy maximization or chaos can drive nanoscale objects to self-assemble into ordered structures. Chaos theory discusses self-organization in terms of islands of predictability in a sea of chaotic unpredictability, again which echoes the concept of the bin stone or patah of order rising from the chaotic waters of noon. It is through spontaneous order, self-organization, and self-assembly that fundamental quantum particles came together to form orderly atoms from the quantum chaos, and the atoms came together to form molecules, and the molecules came together to form matter, etc., all the way to the formation of you. A few years ago, when they were having the evolution conference debate, one of the points of debate was how did life arise from non-living atoms to make up DNA? In science, abiogenesis, or the origin of life, is a natural process by which life has arisen out of non-living matter by way of self-assembly. Order arises out of chaos naturally. The easiest way to understand this is through what they call the Cheerios effect, right? If you ever had a bowl of Cheerios cereal where there were just a few random Cheerios floating around in the milk, over time you'll be able to observe the Cheerios clump together or spontaneously self-assemble into different shapes. If you imagine that these Cheerios are atoms, then the various shapes they come together to form represent the different molecules which could spontaneously form, including the DNA molecule of life. So the order of life naturally rises from chaos. Also, chaos in the form of randomness drives the diversity in life through random genetic mutations and natural selection. The evolution of life on Earth, language, crystallization, animal swarming, and a free market economy are all examples of systems which evolve through spontaneous order out of chaos. In mathematics and computer science, the concept of chaos coming from order is reflected in the concept of a random number generator, which is a deterministic or orderly process, equation, or algorithm that produces random or chaotic results. The concept of order coming from chaos can also be found in mathematics and statistics through probability theory, which creates orderly mathematical equations to describe non-deterministic, uncertain, or chaotic processes. So now that we've discussed the chaos gods and chaos theories, I'd like to discuss chaos magic. So magic is defined as the art of producing a desired result through the use of various techniques which presumably give the impression to control the forces of nature. Arthur C. Clarke states that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, and since engineering is the application of scientific knowledge to produce technology which facilitates the control over certain aspects of nature, then the analogy between magic and engineering is a plausible extension. But what differentiates magic from engineering is that the magician chooses to keep the details of their method secret, obscure, and esoteric, while engineers make the details of their method publicly known and exoteric. So when I'm using the term magic here, I'm referring to both esoteric, speculative chaos magic in the traditional way that we think of the word magic, but I'm also referring to exoteric, operative, practical application of chaos theory to engineer technology to control chaos. So I also could have titled this presentation with the triple tau or triple T alliteration: chaos theory, chaos theology, chaos technology. So before we can talk about the esoteric, speculative chaos magic, we have to start with what inspired its development, and that would be Aleister Crowley's Thelema philosophy, which promoted the practice of what he called magic with a K, which they defined as the science and art of causing change to occur with one's will. Within Aleister Crowley's Thelema, there was only one rule, which was derived from chaos philosophy, and it was do what thou wilt, as mentioned earlier. Aleister Crowley's Thelema philosophy went on to inspire Anton LaVey to develop the Church of Satan and Satanism in 1966, where its practitioners also participated in a system of magic. Anton LaVey's Church of Satan would inspire the formation of the Temple of Set, or Brotherhood of Setians, in 1975, who saw themselves as a magical order practicing black magic. Again, recall that Set was the name of one of the chaos gods from ancient Egypt. So when chaos magic was finally developed in the 1970s, it was inspired by all these pre-existing magical philosophies, as well as Wicca and the theosophy of Helena Blavatsky. Chaos magic was also referred to as success magic or results-based magic, where the emphasis was on the attainment of results rather than on any particular method, ritual, symbol, or otherwise ornamental aspects of occult traditions. So the idea of chaos magic was to throw away all the rules, i.e. chaos, and only do what works, what gets results. The philosophy of chaos magicians is that there are no rules, there is no truth, there is no methodology, everything is permitted, anything goes as long as it yields desired results. Chaos magic focuses on what is practical over what is theoretical. Even though it is a contradictory oxymoron, there are 6 principles of chaos magic, which are: 1. Avoid dogma and only be loyal to what works, i.e. pragmatism. 2. Evidence and experience is more important than theory. 3. Keep track of all your activities so that you will know what works. 4. Decondition and desensitize yourself by breaking down your existing belief systems and belief structures so that you can be fluid within all systems. 5. Use different approaches to try to think about things and do things. Try anything. Do not be limited. And 6. Enter into altered states of consciousness in an attempt to gain gnosis. Another religious, theological, occult society based on chaos philosophy is Discordianism. Discordianism is a paradigm based on the book Principia Discordia, written in 1963 by Malaclips the Younger and Omar Khayyam Ravenhurst. Discordianism was founded as a parody religion, i.e. it's not supposed to be taken serious, and its followers worship the Greek god of chaos named Eris. Both chaos magic and Discordianism have associations with an even stranger organization, the Moorish Orthodox Church, an outgrowth of the Moorish Science Temple of America. Now, it's important to note that this Moorish Orthodox Church is not affiliated with the Moorish Science Temple of America, and the founder of the Moorish Orthodox Church was a white man named Peter Lamborn Wilson, who used the pseudonym Hakim Bey. Now, it's extremely important for me to emphasize here that many of these esoteric occult societies based on chaos philosophy, namely Aleister Crowley's Thelema, Anton LaVey's Church of Satan or Satanism, the Temple of Set or the Brotherhood of Setians, and this Moorish Orthodox Church. Many of these groups and organizations were into some sick and depraved things. Again, they were founded based on chaos philosophy, which means there are no rules, which means there's no morals, there's no ethics, anything goes. So when you investigate these different organizations, you'll find that they were into some really sick stuff. And that's what happens when chaos philosophy is taken to the extreme, where all the rules are thrown out the window and anything goes. So it is believed that the members of the Moorish Orthodox Church, along with an eccentric group of artists, musicians, rocket scientists, cyberneticists, mystics, anarchists, and disgraced chaos scientists, took part in developing a machine in a building in Ong's Hat in southern New Jersey that was capable of interdimensional travel to parallel universes, i.e. the butterfly effect. So this idea of being able to travel to random locations and enter into parallel universes is championed in the modern day by a group called the Randonauts, who use the Randonauts app on their cell phone to travel to random locations in an attempt to enter into parallel universes. So those are the different esoteric speculative organizations that have made attempts to apply principles from the philosophy of chaos. So now that we've discussed the esoteric speculative side, let's talk about the exoteric operative practical scientific application of chaos theory to engineer technology to control chaos. Again, referring back to the image of the chaos god Seth defeating the chaos entity Apep, we can think of these concepts as using chaos to control chaos. So some examples of the practical application of chaos are using randomized controlled trials when conducting scientific experiments to reduce or eliminate bias, using Markov chains to predict the stochastic random processes of the stock market, using a controlled demolition process to tear down buildings, using the mathematical models provided in game theory to predict the random outcomes of certain games of chance like blackjack, using pattern recognition algorithms in facial recognition software to identify random individuals based on specific features. As we mentioned earlier, the subatomic world is dominated by randomness, so the field of quantum computing and quantum mechanics are both based on the practical application of understanding the randomness that exists at the quantum level. Using cryptography to randomize information and create codes and ciphers for secure communication and encryption, like the nuclear codes or cryptocurrency. Using statistical mechanics and models for weather forecasting. And using information theory to determine meaningful communication from random chaotic noise. So take control of the chaos and obtain your power. Peace.